I mean, even if Angelina was involved, she wasn't the center of attention. Well, that's not true. She was the
Hello, guys, one more time, and welcome to Ring Royalty. We have the Silver Crown over here, and we have a very popular guest already. That means we're going to talk about part three of the best rivalries in women's wrestling. So, Alexa, one more time, I have to ask you, how are you today?
doing good. It's snowy outside, but we're doing fine.
Are you ready to do part three?
I'm ready. Let's hit it with the TNA knockouts this time.
Exactly. I wanted to mention this time around we're going to have a TNA special, or well, Impact Wrestling special, or well, the same thing. And a special for the Knockouts division, 5 rivalries as always, and let's start. Alexan, what's the first rivalry that we have in this video?
The first one we have is probably one of TNA's best. It will be Gail Kim versus Awesome Kong, which is the feud that made me a wrestling fan. So for me, that's big something. An underdog versus powerhouse story. Nowhere in the world will a girl like Gail Kim win against a girl like Kong. Not that it doesn't make sense, but it's like the small, skinny girl versus the powerhouse.
David against Goliath story, and I don't think we have seen a women's wrestler like Awesome Kong before that feud. At least in major promotions, I doubt it. They were so different that made them stand out. Because let's remember this feud happened around 2007, 2008, after Trish and Lita retired. And basically women's wrestling got a little bit dead after that because WWE basically put all the spotlight into Trish and Lita, and when they left, they needed to build credible wrestlers again. For me, these two really started women's revolution.
For most wrestling fans, it's just WWE, and they seem to forget that there's other stuff out there. So to me, I agree with you. That's what started, and the knockouts in general, the woman revolution for what we see right now. Like I said, the underdog, Gail Kim, was getting her ass kicked, but I will always find a way to win. And even it was brutal matches because Gail's more of an athletic wrestler, so she had to be more brutal in her way to fight. She wasn't going to win just because she's good. She had to find something else, and I think that made her a better wrestler.
Okay, I get it. I remember the no disqualification match. It was brutal, and it was something that we haven't seen women's wrestling before either, because they started to fight in the crowd. So the fans were ecstatic, and they haven't seen women reach that level of viciousness just yet. What I remember the most is that match and the one where Awesome Kong finally defeats Gail King after a triple awesome bomb to become the Knockouts champion, which was the right choice because Awesome Kong was new, so they needed to build her as a monster, and they did it correctly, not giving the title to Kong straight away. She was completely different from the mold they've been showing so far on TV, and fans already acknowledged her presence. They gave her the title. For me, a pretty outstanding rivalry between these two.
Yeah, and it was great matches. It was two styles very different, but it was working.
If you have to pick a highlight for this rivalry, what would it be?
But I will go with the street fight, the one where Kong won, if I'm not mistaken, because it was more of an equal match. Whether there's no DQ, was more Kong dominating. I appreciated that Gail, like I said, found a way to be more brutal, a brawler.
I would also go with the same match, the match that Awesome Kong finally became the Knockouts champion. Even though Awesome Kong was supposed to be the heel of the rivalry, I just wanted to see her win the championship for some reason, because I expected her to win the title right away as soon as she had the opportunity, but she didn't. And that kept me interested to see when were they going to give the title to Kong, because it was obvious that she was going to become champion at some point. That match definitely the highlight of this rivalry for me. Moving to the second rivalry in this video, we're going to talk about a controversial entry because these two women were, introduced to everyone in WWE, but their rivalry was another level when they were in TNA, and I'm talking about Tara against Mickie James. Back in 2010, Tara and Mickie James had a killer rivalry, and it was so awesome that for me, basically that would be probably Tara's best feud in her whole career and Mickie's second feud right after Trish. They legitimately looked like they hated each other, and they had lots of segments, they have lots of matches, and every time they were on TV, they found a way to include a new element into the rivalry. Let's remember that Mickie was introduced as a special guest referee in a title match, and Tara won that match, but then basically handed the title to Madison Rayne. And that's how the rivalry started. Tara was Madison Rayne's bodyguard, and Mickie James was the new threat for the championship. They had killer matches, including a Falls Count Anywhere match, which was brutal, and a steel cage match to end the feud when Mickie did a test press from the top of the cell on Tara, which caused her to actually tore her ligament in the elbow and be out of action for a long time. But it was just flawless. There is absolutely anything I can think that was bad in this rivalry. We had interesting segments. Mickie James' hardcore country performance was interrupted by Tara, and they had a brawl. They used to have brutal brawls in the back, sometimes including other knockouts like the Beautiful People or Sarita. So they brought the element of interest to the whole division, not only to their feud, and that is what makes it so special.
Yeah, and they're two of the best to ever wrestle. I mean, in WWE, Victoria was good, but I think she was on another level wrestling-wise in TNA. People don't give her the credit she deserves. That feud with Mickie was so good, like you said, so vicious, and even if none of them were the champions, which is something that's different from most of the other feuds we've talked about.
That makes it even more special, because if you can shine without a championship being involved, that means you're doing a good job. My highlight would definitely be Mickie James' test press from the top of the steel cage. I've seen lots of a steel cage match for women now, but back then they were only a few, mostly in TNA, and that was one of the most aggressive ones I've seen. So definitely deserves to be the highlight of this rivalry.
Yeah, that steel cage match is my highlight too. And again, here I hesitated with the Falls Count Anywhere match, but I didn't like the ending with Madison getting involved in the bathroom. Or I prefer the steel cage match because it was just the two of them. Something new with two of the best to ever do it, and with amazing spots. That's my highlight, that match too. The third rivalry will be between Winter and Velvet Sky from 2011, which is another feud that didn't involve the title.
This feud would be very controversial. I know some fans loved it and others hated it.
But that feud started when Winter started to brainwash Angelina Love into that zombie girl, which we know Angelina didn't enjoy doing, as she said herself.
They started to do the angle where Winter and Angelina won the Knockouts Tag Team Championships, and Velvet was fuming because, of course, she was Angelina's partner. But then again, I agree, Angelina maybe wasn't as important in the feud wrestling-wise until she became a zombie, because she was kind of like the peacemaker at some point.
Before she was completely turned into whatever that was. And that was enjoyable. It wasn't the best wrestling matches, perhaps, because Velvet Sky is not the best wrestler. I think Winter is a much better wrestler, but it was a story there that for me worked.
It also helped Velvet a lot because she started to look like an underdog, and she became probably one of the biggest baby faces the Knockouts division have ever seen, and that wouldn't have happened if Angelina and Velvet were still a tag team. The reason that you mentioned Angelina disliked this rivalry, I think it's mostly because of the ending. It was weird, it was rushed.
It was like the last match, I think, was the mixed tag team match between Kurt Velvet versus Jeff Winter and Angelina, and it just ended there.
I am not sure what happened, because that was the weird transition when TNA became Impact Wrestling. Something happened along the lines of the rivalry and the creatives. I think some people were, fired, and the creatives that were part of that storyline were not there anymore. So the new ones had no idea what to do with it. I remember after the match you mentioned, Velvet faced Angelina Winter in a handicap match. And when she won, ODB returned and attacked Velvet from behind, and they moved to Velvet against ODB, and Angelina and Winter were left in obscurity. The special rivalry, well, like you said, there was not an end. The reason that makes me feel a little bit torn about this feud is that they never explain why Angelina stopped being a zombie but still wanted to tag with Winter. That's why I don't understand, because she was forced or drugged into this alliance. But when she regained control of her senses, why would she agree to tag with someone that basically drugged her?
Their part that didn't make sense, but it brought something out of Velvet that we didn't see before. Feuding with Winter was more of a vicious side.
But in The Beautiful People, Velvet always seemed as a sidekick. She was never like the leader of the team, if you think about it. So if they wanted to make her a top star, they needed to build her as one. So what's your highlight of this rivalry?
I would go with, like I said, with not specific match because I don't remember most of them, but mostly with Velvet Sky work. That Hopper being, like you said, the top baby face that they needed.
Well, wrestling wise, it wasn't much. It was a interesting story that had potential to be one of the best storylines ever if they handle it correctly, which they didn't. But I'm going to talk about Winter's work. I mean, the passion that she put into it and the way she managed to have a believable character in a new company where there were lots of women that had, strong gimmicks like The Beautiful People, Mickie James and Tara Madison. So props to Winter for that work. For rivalry number 4, we're going to talk about one more time something unusual, a very demonic character, because if Winter was considered weird, we're going to talk about Soo Young, the Undead Bride, against Allie. And that rivalry was very entertaining and it brought attention to the division when it was needed again. Back when we talk about Gail King and Awesome Kong, the Knuckles division was on her prime. Then again, they had a rocky road over the years, and at this stage that we're talking right now, they needed something fresh. And the debut of Soo Young attacking the current Knuckles champion Allie was the perfect choice. Allie was already a huge babyface after being mistreated by Maria, Sienna, and Laurel, so she had all the popularity in the world. So what better way to introduce a unique character like Soo Young against the current most popular women in the division? And the feud involved also Rosemary, because they put Rosemary in a coffin. I think Sue burned Rosemary's casket, so she was supposed to be dead, and then Allie was seeking for revenge. So it was a smart feud because Allie, who was the champion, was the one looking for a fight with the challenger. And that's not usually what we see. Usually the challenger is the one that is constantly attacking the champion or torturing him or her to get the championship match. In this case, Soo Young destroyed Allie's best friend. So Allie was the one trying to attack and end Soo Young's career.
It was such a special feud because, like you said, beside Rosemary, they didn't have any, like I would say, strong character that people cared about. So that brought the spotlight that was needed, and it was a strong feud. They didn't have that much matches, I would say.
I have only like 2 or 3 maximum.
There was the build up. Again, here the story for it was what was the best. I mean, they had killer matches because they're both good wrestlers. They had strong matches and a very strong story, and involving, like you said, Rosemary was well done.
And as we were talking now about our 4th rivalry in the video, we have to say and give credits to TNA or Impact Wrestling, whatever you want to call it, because they always have great storytelling. And they had that underground cinematic, and it brings a fresh thing to the company. So it was really clever for me. And also Rosemary was injured, so she couldn't wrestle back then, and they handled it really well. So Allie and Sue would have the whole spotlight, but Rosemary would still be involved in the rivalry somehow. So, what's your highlight of this rivalry?
The last match, the last match they had where Soo Young won, and because I like I said, Dark Alley a lot, and I like the finish of it with the, like I said, the closed casket and the honored brides and Soo Young standing over the casket, the cinematic part of it, which was, as I said, well done in there. So that would be my favorite match. Their first match was good too, but I think the second one was better.
I'm going to choose Soo Young's mind games as highlight. And she took souls away with caskets. Like, her whole intimidation process against her opponent is the one thing that I like the most in this feud.
So our number 5 real rivalry would be between Tessa Blanchard and Taya Valkyrie. I know a lot of people hate Tessa Blanchard for who she is as a person. We're talking about the wrestler people, so please just bear with us.
The part that I think it's interesting is the Knockouts division basically was dominated by Tessa Blanchard for a while, and there wasn't a legitimate contender for her at Bound for Glory, which is the biggest event of the year. And then out of nowhere, Taya Valkyrie, who was nowhere to be found for months, records a video challenging Tessa for the biggest event of the year for some reason, and she was acting more like a baby face because Taya was a heel before that. If they were two heels, she was going to be overshadowed by Tessa. So they had a match at Bound for Glory. They had a match at Homecoming in January of the next year when Gail King was the special guest referee, and that's the match where Tessa lost the championship, blaming Gail. And then they had the street fight to finish their feud in Mexico. That match was brutal. Tessa literally drop kicked Taya's head against the barricade. So that was vicious. And when Taya stomped basically on Tessa's head to break a table, that also looked very vicious. I mean, they both have influence of Mexican wrestling because they've trained there and been on that promotion for a while. So as far as I'm concerned, Mexican wrestling can be very, over the top, especially with extreme spots. I guess they were doing it on Mexico, so they wanted to bring their A games because that's basically where they learn how to wrestle.
Yeah, and they were two physically strong women, so they could pull it off. I mean, I know the street fight with Gail Kim and Kong was good, but it wasn't as brutal as that one.
My highlight from this feud would definitely be, even though I love the street fight and I mentioned how vicious it is, I would go with their first match at Bound for Glory. Tessa Blanchard, for the first time on pay-per-view, I believe won a match with a Magnum, which is that code breaker from the top rope. And when I saw that, I was in awe. Like, that was the first time I saw Magnum, because she usually did that hammerlock DDT, but Taya Valkyrie kicked out of it. So when that happened, I thought like Tessa was going to lose the championship. That was her finisher. She doesn't have another one. And then she pulled Magnum off, and I was like, I mean, lovely spot and a believable way to defeat Taya Valkyrie.
Yeah, my highlights though would be the street fight. For me, that's the match I remember the most. Like we said, brutal, well done by both women. That's a finish that could have gone either way, I think. I'm glad they kept the title on Taya and moved Tessa to something that was with Gail Kim, I think, after, which was wonderful as well. Because they could have gone for like so many months while they were the two biggest stars, and like we wouldn't be talking about it if we went for like 6 more months, I think.
I mean, they knew that it was special, and they stopped it when they felt like it was enough. And I think that's a good call. So those two were probably the top stars in the Knockouts division at that point, and it made sense that they used their star power for 2 different feuds.
Yeah, I agree. It needed to be ended there, and it ended perfectly for them.
Okay, so that was it for the 3rd episode of Best Rivalries in Women's Wrestling. How are you feeling after this episode?
It's different, I would say, talking about the knockouts, because usually we talk about the WWE, so I enjoy that it's different. I hope people enjoy it too.
I hope people feel refreshed after this episode. We're going to try to give it a spin every now and then. Probably next year we could even do an AEW special. Any final words you want to say to everyone?
I just hope you enjoyed it. I know some people don't watch TNA, so I hope even if you don't, that you watch the video and you enjoy what we said. Let us know down below what you thought, and I hope you enjoyed.
My name is Alexis, as you already know. Here's my Instagram, and I'm gonna leave Alex Ann's channel over here. I mean, she's a YouTuber. Go check her content out. She's also great, and I will see you guys next week. Goodbye.